Great. Okay, so we're going to start the meeting, and then we'll do introductions. Okay. So let me get to the invite with the agenda, because I should read that little shtick that I should read before every meeting. Suddenly I can't find it. Here we go. Oh, yes. Okay, so folks, by order of the governor, virtual Zoom meetings are taking place due to COVID-19 outbreak, and the Governor Baker's and his order that town hall is closed to public regards to public meetings in Southampton Housing Authority, unless otherwise postponed or canceled, were to meet virtually, and this is permitted by the state through Governor Baker's order and the open meeting laws adjustment. I'm paraphrasing. But the point is, everyone should understand that this is a public forum. This meeting is recorded, and we're allowed to meet in this forum per Governor Baker's order. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay, good. All right. So we'll call the meeting to order. And I propose, in addition to the agenda, before we do approval of minutes, is that we do our introductions. My name is Jim Sini. I'm the chair of the Southampton Housing Authority. And I'll say right now, if I have any success being the chair, it's because I get a lot of help from the members. One of which is Janet. But Janet, I'll let you introduce yourself, please.
Janet Kane. I'm the clerk. So I'm the one that nips at Jim's heels because I do the posting of the meeting. So it's like, Jim. And then he nips at mine back. So that's good. And I'm also the chair of the Council on Aging Board. And that was sort of what drove me to get involved in the Housing Authority initially. So.
Okay. Chuck.
I am Chuck, or Charlie Konecki, on the Housing Authority. I'm also liaison to the Community Preservation Committee as well.
Great. And Brian?
Yep, and I'm Brian Steele. This is my first term. I was elected back in September, so I'm just getting started with everybody.
Nice. And we have two guests. Sarah, would you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Sierra Simmons. I live down on Route 10 across from the Sunoco, and my job is I'm the Grants Development and Human Resources Manager at the Community Music School of Springfield. Wow. And I'm just interested in local politics and local happenings, helping my town be better. So I wanted to get involved.
Awesome. And Katie?
Yeah, I'm Katie Lacey. I'm on the staff at the Massachusetts Housing Partnership. And I have a little presentation if we want to talk, or we don't have to do that. Brian answered one of my questions. I have so many that you are all elected officials, it sounds like. Wow.
Yes, the four of us, and we have a fifth position, which is a state assigned, which we would love to see if we could have, if Sierra's willing, to be the state assigned person. I don't know, it worked out.
So you're under that housing authority statute. So you're kind of adjacent to town government, right? You don't like, the selectmen don't tell you what to do necessarily because you're an independently elected board.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Okay. You know what? I'm going to propose. Well, it won't take long.
Do it. Take your time. I blocked out.
Members have a chance to read the December minutes.
Excuse me.
Is there any feedback on the December minutes?
Typos, grammar as well.
No, look good.
Hmm? Hearing no feedback, do I hear a motion for approval?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
A second?
Second my minutes.
Okay. Hope you can second your own. All in favor of the voting members present for the approval of the December minutes, please by signify name and saying aye. That's our process for this virtual meeting.
Kane, aye.
Kaneki, aye.
Steele, aye.
Sini, aye. It's unanimous. Perfect. All right. Thank you all. So now, next on our agenda is Katie presenting to us, and I put discuss because I think we can let this be more free flowing. And I'd like Katie, actually, I'll speak for myself. I don't know too much. So if you have a presentation, I'd like to target about 20 minutes. We have a full agenda tonight, and
Yeah,
it
good.
sounds like you'd be willing to come back and help us.
Oh, yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
Okay. So, I mean, we could probably spend a couple hours learning from you, but we do have a full agenda. So maybe we target 20 minutes or so. And so
Yeah,
given
yeah.
the time limit, does your presentation and then maybe some follow-up Q&A fit into that?
Yeah,
20?
yeah. I just threw some stuff together to kind of get the conversation going. I know sounds like you have a full agenda, but I do really want to hear what you've been working on so far. At recommendation, I listened to the planning board meeting of November 18th, 2020, and saw Jim presenting to your planning board. And I have a couple questions about that. Who's their consultant? Is that Larry Koff?
I can confirm the last name.
I don't think that's his last name.
No,
He recently retired from
Yeah,
PVC?
I thought it
Yes.
Okay, I know him. I'm like, I know that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's ironic you asked that because PVPC, I had a week off last week, and I spent some time doing housing authority things, looking over all my notes, trying to get organized. It's a lot of work for a volunteer board.
Yeah.
But one of the things I realized is that our previous report, it was
Your housing production plan. Yeah.
from PVPC recommended exactly what I was trying to do.
That's right.
The
I just
planning board
looked at that. Yeah. And it's 10 years old now.
Yes. So I in reading that and fully now internalizing as I'm starting to understand things, I couldn't help but see the irony in that, because
Things take time.
yeah, but anyway, so
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, so I just threw some stuff together. I'll buzz through it really quick. I'm going to just share my screen, just sort of what we do. And then I looked and probed a little bit about what you do. Okay, hold on. Share. You can see that, right?
perfectly.
Yeah, okay. La.
While you're doing this, Katie, I want to acknowledge that Daniel LaValle of the planning board was key in connecting you and I, and then
Yeah.
the board here. So I want to publicly acknowledge his
Yeah.
role.
It's always strange when you do this screen sharing, because then at that point I can't see you at all. So I just am talking to this screen. So just shout out if something comes, like that's too long. So I'm just going to quickly buzz through this. So this is us, Mass Housing Partnership. We're primarily a finance agency. We were started in 1985. We're kind of a parallel to Mass Housing. But we also work with municipalities to help them get to new ways of meeting affordable housing needs.
Are you private and not for profit, or are you?
That's a great question. We are a quasi-state agency. So we use money from the community. We are technically state employees. We don't cost state money because we get funds from investing in affordable permanent housing. Initially, the funding source was through the Community Reinvestment Act. This is a lot of information, but if you know that when banks merge, we got that money. But so that's it. Quasi-state agency. So think Mass Housing is another one. The MWRA. They tend to be kind of more Eastern Mass focused. So these are the things we do. Community assistance team. We do permanent financing for affordable rental housing. We have a great one mortgage program, which actually has a lot of activity in your area for first-time home buyers. And we have a Center for Housing Data. And so we've done the Community Assistance Division. It's a small but mighty group of 4 of us at the moment. That we've worked all over the state. Really a range of projects. I'll just go back to that. You know, we do everything from help people sort of start talking about their zoning. We hire third-party consultants for them. I think our specialty, that's not really my specialty, is helping community groups that want to use municipally owned land to turn it into affordable housing. So sort of walking them through that process, which is complicated. Just a few fun tools we have. We have this great data town and housing toolbox on our website. Both are fantastic, and I'm going to show you a few things from that just because I thought, you know, classic consultant, I'll talk about who you are. So, you know, on Data Town, you're able to get groovy graphs like this, and it helped me just figure out who you are. So this is your population. You probably all know this. At the same time, you're building less housing for sure, this is the story all over the state. This is just kind of to get the conversation going. You know, it's primarily single family housing that's getting built. At the same time, you have actually your age profile is sort of a millennial valley, they call it. But what's interesting is you actually have quite a few young people. So a lot of the you have a lot of young people, and then sort of an aging bulge too. But you do have families, and that's a good thing. You know, that's a sign of a healthy community. Your housing stock is largely single family detached, but there are, and I went on Zillow kind of and took a little tour around it. You have a fair amount of it looks like you've got, you know, some condos and rental, and I'd love to get out there, but primarily it's ownership, 91%. And that's opposed to the state where per municipality, well, statewide, it's 62% is home ownership. So there's not much rental housing. And then cost burden, this is sort of, well, you probably know all this stuff. It's a kind of housing ease for people that are paying more than, severely cost burden is they're paying more than 50% of their income. Cost burdened is more than 30% of their income on housing, which these days a lot of us are. But you're not that bad. I mean, you know, many communities have much worse profiles, but you do have a significant chunk of renter households that are severely cost burdened, and a fair number of homeowner households that are cost burdened. One thing, this is just interesting. I just got this because I'm involved with the rural policy of housing. One thing that is interesting, and you guys have probably noticed this, you know, you're going to have a new issue coming up, which is that, you know, I'd heard anecdotally that people are leaving the cities, they're moving to the suburbs. Then I heard, oh, that's not really true. But the fact is, in terms of home sales, prices are definitely going up in Hampden County. But more than that, this...
We're Hampshire County, just so you know.
I'm sorry, Hampshire County. I just misread that. In terms of single family days to offer, you're not as bad as some, but what's happening is stuff really is getting snapped up. And there's other, so you can see that, you know, from the days of they put it on the market, stuff used to sit around, that's gone down dramatically. Not, again, Hampshire shows a 4% drop, but like neighboring counties to you, Franklin County, that's very unusual, I think, that, you know, suddenly stuff's actually really selling there quickly. And there's more scary statistics about like cash sales and stuff.
Right. I think anecdotally, any of us could tell you that. And we actually discussed that, you might remember, on the planning board meeting. with
Yeah.
Larry and how quickly people are bidding during open houses. And it feels like 2007 all over.
Well, I lost my place here. I had sort of thought, oh, that doesn't necessarily true, but it actually, in your neck of the woods, it really is true. So you guys know this stuff, there are a lot of, I guess I'm just doing this as comfort. This is the story everywhere across the state. So we really have this issue in Massachusetts. And the things that are going to affect the cost of housing are the rate of development, which is not that high in your town, land costs, availability of water and sewer. At that planning board meeting, there was a lot of talk about septic. That's a reality. Construction costs, average market rents, typical sizes for your market, state land use regulations, and then reductions in state and local subsidy. That's a whole nother topic. And, basically when you want to add affordable housing, capital A or lowercase a, it's really just a question of how much it costs to build, how much it costs to borrow money. It's all dollars and cents, unfortunately. So we can talk about this, but I think we actually could take a little break now. And I'm just kind of curious what you guys are up to. I have some sort of municipal strategies we could look at. Oh yeah, I have to stop sharing my screen. I'm curious what your goals. So, I've introduced who we are. I did a little probing on who you are. I'd love to know just what you're thinking and what you've been working on in the past.
Well, what we've been working on is, I think one of our biggest barriers is trying to get started and actually build some momentum. And just, from 30,000 feet, and this is just my opinion, Janet and Chuck, particularly Brian, you're still relatively new, but can chime in. But from 30,000 feet, it feels like in order to really get some ground here, we have to establish a housing trust. If we're going to purchase land, for example, to create affordable housing, if we're going to even change ownership of municipal lands toward permanent housing, it seems like we need a housing trust, and that needs to be run by someone in a paid position in town, either the town administrator or the select board or something. It can't be the housing authority folks. There needs to be
and the select
an
board's not
investment.
paid either, so.
I'm sorry, Janet?
Select board's not paid either, so.
Right.
What kind of staff infrastructure do you have? Do you have a health agent? Do you have a planner? Do you have any of that stuff?
We have a health agent. We don't have a planner.
We don't have a planner. We have a town administrator who wears many hats, and just my observation of his work, I think he's, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, he's already overworked.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So it probably makes sense that it comes under him, for example, the trust or whatever, but it would be another thing.
Jim, would you mind if I jump in on that?
Not at all, please.
All right, great. I was planning a presentation on establishing the Affordable Housing Trust for later in the meeting, but I feel like it's important to point out in section 55C, it talks about the Board of Trustees. It says, there shall be a Board of Trustees no less than 5, including the Chief Executive Officer. Where the Chief Executive Officer is a multi-member body, that body shall designate a minimum of one of its members to serve on the board.
That's right.
So it doesn't mandate that the person is an employee of the town, but it has to be at least one person from the Board of Selectmen and 4 other members from any other walk of life, really.
And I think that person, select board person, would appoint the other people and make the sounds like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Right.
I just want to chime in here that there's a Shelley Gehring who's doing the trust workshop. We help communities set up trusts all the time. There's a great guidebook on all the rules and stuff like that. Communities, Brian is absolutely right. You've got to have that board set up. But then in terms of getting the work done, people do it any number of ways. I'm trying to Leverett, I think the Franklin County Housing Authority administers, they have a buy down program. You can kind of get a third party agent. Or you can do it with volunteers. It's ideal to have staff, but a lot of communities don't.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's good to hear, because I've always, I came to the strong conclusion that we were just spinning our wheels out here with such a small but not so small town, yet still kind of this small town approach of all these volunteers trying to do this.
It's not just you. It's not just small towns. This is Massachusetts state government. We have this proud tradition of home rule, and it can translate into complete chaos, honestly. There's a lot of boards. It's good stuff, and it keeps everyone involved, but it is hard to get stuff going. So don't feel bad about that.
Well, I wonder if we could find a grant-funded position, someone who can maybe make the salary themselves by administering the fund well, by investing well or some such thing, or find a grant that would pay someone to do it.
I mean, you can use CPC
To fund the position, or to?
in part, yeah.
Okay.
Right, because it'd be hard, but a part-time position, this is getting a little bit out of scope of this conversation. I always wondered if the town needed like a deputy town administrator that worked 20 hours a week that filled in these gaps.
Yeah.
It's not just the housing authority that needs support, but
yeah,
that's a suggestion, but probably again not for this moment.
But Brian, it's great you're reading all that stuff, because it's complicated, and it's really good if someone in the group has all the actual laws figured out. And again, that if I could just, there is that, I'll send you the link to the guidebook that's on the housing toolbox at Mass Housing Partnership about establishing a housing trust. And it sounds like, Janet, you've been going to some of those trainings. So that's definitely one thing.
Can I ask a question, even maybe out of the scope at the moment? When you said CPC could fund, what could they actually fund? A position of the leader of a housing trust, or what? I just need some clarification.
I think they can fund part of the cost of the salary position, but I'm not sure. Shelley's the real expert on that, so we should get her to chime in on that.
Yeah. Maybe we could have her join our next meeting. We could put her on the agenda, because there's other things we're working on, considering an update to that 10-year, housing plan, and looking at, Janet's been exploring, municipally owned properties in town. There's a lot of things we're kind of doing simultaneously, but it feels to me, again, just one person's opinion, that getting the housing trust established is really going to allow us to do some work. And that,
I think, is a good idea.
Be our priority.
Yeah. I mean, I can just run, I'm already way past 20 minutes, so I don't want to take up, I have some stuff other people are doing. At the meeting, the planning board meeting, Jim, you talked about maybe some possible, they can't come from your entity. They have to come from the planning board or the board of selectmen, but some zoning changes.
Yep. That's another thing, right?
Yeah. And that's a good, Montague pulled their zoning back to the lot sizes that they had in the 50s and 60s just recently, because like many towns, they'd kind of ballooned up to an acre and a half. And if you look at the homes in the community, they're on a quarter acre, so they actually just brought it back to what it was.
And that's interesting to hear that, it's not such a wild idea that other towns have done this. So that's an interesting perspective. Well, folks, I don't know. I'm willing to give Katie some more time to kind of give us some more information, and everyone okay with that? Expand a little bit?
When 20 minutes goes that fast, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Yeah, but seriously, I don't want to be blabbing away during your meeting. I'm just going to go through the rest of these. And again, this is just so fast. We're moving so quickly here that
Right.
Oh,
Well, again, you've offered to join us again in the future and to assist.
yeah, no, we can, and I'm really supportive of, we want communities to start looking at it. So again, this is sort of the basic menu of strategies we've rolled out. It's all very challenging, but, adopting the Community Preservation Act, which you've done, creating the trust, there's regional housing efforts. There is a zoning reform act that hopefully this year will get passed, but I don't think so. It's going to have to happen in the next couple of days. And then update zoning bylaws and permitting procedures. One of the big things is reducing minimum lot size. So we have one of the biggest single lot sizes per unit in the United States. And a lot of communities, though not a lot, some are actually going back to what they had or reduced lot size. And, there's a little list of those that have.
So, Katie, let me ask you, I'm just going to interrupt you briefly because you mentioned Montague, and one of the concerns locally about going to smaller lot size was the whole septic issue.
Yeah.
In which I countered that if we look at reducing lot size just where the town provides water, so we're not worried about anyone's neighbor's septic contaminating their well. Did they have that similar concern with infrastructure as far as no sewer?
They have a portion of the community sewered, but I think, do you have local Board of Health regulations that are above and beyond Title V or just Title V?
I can't say for certain.
Yeah, because that's sometimes, Title V has a certain amount of, we're going to have to get an engineer involved to tell you how much you can actually build. And there are, Title V sets out the distance between the wells. And you're right, you don't have wells. So I can't tell you how many you can build. But many towns, the lot sizes do not correlate directly with what you can build per Title V. Mm-hmm. You could maybe build more. I mean, you have more dense areas, right?
Yeah.
We do. I mean, as I mentioned in that meeting, the older lots, we have some examples of older lots that are very dense, have been there for over 50 years, probably 60 years.
Yeah.
And to my knowledge, there's no issue with septics going bad and no place to build them or repair them.
Right.
These areas do have town water. They don't have wells.
Yeah.
But there's a good chunk of town that has town water.
It's a good percentage.
Yeah. Right. Very few people have wells now that I think about it. So you'd have to do that calculation of the 110 gallons per bedroom. And Massachusetts actually doesn't have as high requirements as some states, but it's still quite considerable. Anyway, so lowering the lot size, it looks like you have an accessory dwelling unit.
I think it could be expanded, though, maybe.
Pardon me? Well, and also I think, there's a big push for communities to make it by right. I mean, why do you need a special permit to do that if you are complying with septic? So just throwing that out there.
Right.
It is.
One of the things related we're looking into is we had a presentation by Chris Lee, a local developer of tiny homes.
Oh, yeah.
Which is, it can be an option for folks. People think of tiny homes, they think they're building a home in their former, lawnmower shed, and that's not the case.
Well, your local habitat group has been really taking a leadership role in that. They're in Hampshire County, right?
Easthampton, I think.
Right, or Northampton. Anyway, I've met with them. They're terrific. So that accessory units, 2 and 3 family homes, you mentioned that, Jim. They can look the same outside, but have 2 units inside. This often helps people that are overhoused, like me and my husband right now. Keep the house and add, it doesn't look that different. So that's an idea. A couple towns have tried to do this where they say, hey, we have these non-conforming lots in town. We'll waive those requirements if you put a affordable home on it. I don't think they've gotten a lot of traction, but I'm intrigued with the idea. So this is Dennis, where they put that in their bylaw. You know, the whole top of shop thing. This is in Hingham, where I used to work. That building, they zoned it for commercial downstairs, residential upstairs. Of course, it was impossible to build because of fire separation, but eventually the whole building burned down. And so when they built it back, voila, they did get apartments upstairs. These things you seem familiar with. There's cluster zoning, open space development. A lot of the towns in your area have been real leaders in this stuff. Mm-hmm. I'm not saying these are super affordable. They do provide a variety of housing types, and technically it should be cheaper to build if you're not spread out so far. Mm-hmm.
Katie, when you talk about smaller lots, is that the same thing as some towns are promoting something called infill, where you just build houses in a tighter space so you can...
Well, infill lots are when there's a vacant lot between two houses, say, or in a neighborhood. And right, exactly. And yet it wouldn't conform with zoning, but like it wouldn't meet your dimensional requirements for a home, but you let someone build one there anyway. You know, that there's a provision in your bylaw saying you can build it there if it's affordable. I'm just about done here. The LIP program, I don't know if you're 40B, everyone thinks it's so evil, but there is this local initiative program where the community endorses the project. And it's a great project because basically the developer and the community can kind of work together on what the project is going to look like, and they get to override local zoning.
What does LIP stand for?
It stands for Local Initiative Program. It's was created as part of the 40B statute, and it's run by Department of Housing and Community Development. And it's worth, in fact, we're going to put on a training on LIP 40Bs shortly. Again, here's this affordable housing trusts. And they're great because they give you a lot of flexibility to acquire, create, preserve, and support affordable housing. Just some quick examples. Leverett has this down. Basically, they help acquire existing affordable homes, and the regional house and deed restrict them to maintain affordability, and it's maintained by the Regional Housing Authority.
When you say maintained by the Regional Housing Authority.
Okay, so I noticed in your planning board meeting, there was a lot of talk about something that is a legit concern, but not as bad as the consultant was saying, which is that once you create an affordable unit, right, someone has to ensure that the deed restriction stays in place, that whoever buys it or rents it is an eligible household.
Right. Essentially,
yeah, it's not as big a lift as I think the consultant that was speaking at the planning board meeting was saying. And there are people in your region that can help you out with that. But it is good to think about what's going to happen at the end of your efforts. You know, who's going to be in charge of these affordable units?
Exactly. I think that's really important. That's the things that worries me is, you know, all the members sitting here aren't going to be on this board forever. So 10, 20 years from now, who's managing the properties on, and when I say managing, you know, or monitoring, so that you finally build some affordable housing, it has to stay affordable.
Well,
who manages that transaction?
And I can send you all sorts of, we have so much to talk about. I'll just give you a quick, so Norfolk, they've again had this thing where they have a goal, they use their CPC, it goes to the trust. They actually purchase smaller homes in their community and put a deed restriction on them. And then Sudbury, I'm trying to remember what they do. They do a buy down program for existing homes that people can apply for with a subsidy. and then those get a deed restriction put on them too. Here's some other stuff. Partially what you can do, and then I'm going to actually stop sharing, is, a lot of this stuff is just starting the conversation and, creating that sort of system of support where you're speaking the right language. It's a long journey. I mean, I will warn you, this is a long journey.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well,
a whole bunch of ideas.
Right. Anyone have questions for Katie? For me, I just want to start a relationship and having you keep coming back and consult with us. It's a great service that your team provides.
What is your relationship with the planning board like? Like, is it a good, given that they bring forward zoning amendments?
I think it's pretty good. I think the chair is open to hearing what we have to say and open to it. I think the members are also, frankly. There's one member in particular I know who's very supportive. I know her through the Master Plan Implementation Committee, which has been another benefit of that committee. So I think it's a good relationship. We have to keep educating each other, I think. There's things, there's information that the planning board has that, I'm ignorant of. I can't speak for Chuck, Janet, or Brian, but, there's a lot for me to learn. But I think there's areas where we can provide education for the planning board too regarding their concerns. And I do think there's places where our circles, cross and there's shared goals that we can reach. I'm optimistic. Yeah. That's my opinion. I don't know what anyone else thinks.
Because you guys are all familiar with the big, the time frame on getting some zoning changed. You've got to sort of back it up from, you've got your town meeting, and when it gets submitted, you have to get the planning board to vote, and town meeting's only once a year. So it's a journey,
Right. That's not an easy process. The take home from me when I went to a presentation by another agency about, that overlay districts can make that a little less complicated because you're not trying to rewrite zoning. You're basically laying something over on top of makes it a little easier. So I've been hearing that. I was really a proponent of that. Why reinvent the wheel? Let's just
Does that have to still be approved at a town meeting? Right.
Yeah. All zoning changes do. And this is why Massachusetts is so locked up right now, because everything goes through these town meetings. I worked in this environment for a long time, and it requires a supermajority, 60%. You all know this if you go to town meeting. And so a majority can support it, but it doesn't pass. And I've seen a lot of really great projects go down by, 20 votes. It just doesn't take much to torpedo something.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, but I like your idea of just sort of like figuring one goal, one at a time. Like, we're going to get this trust off the ground and just focusing on that, and maybe one zoning change or something like that. And just because it can be a bit overwhelming,
Right. I think we all come with our different interests. So I'm really pleased that Brian's been doing some studying and reading. That's great. That's what we need. Janet is coming with a lot of interest, including she really wants to look at those properties in town. I'm kind of coming from a zoning change perspective. I think Chuck, by association, brings a lot of things, including a health perspective, I think. So, but we need to kind of focus. What I'm hearing you say is all those interests are important and will play out over time.
Totally.
But we need to, one of the things, again, that I sometimes find myself in, unfortunately, is trying to do a bunch of different things at once. I think we can do things simultaneously, but we really, what I'm hearing you say is if we focus, we're likely to have more success than if we keep spreading it out.
Yeah, and right now in particular, I think, since particularly since, George Floyd, like I've been, I'm a certified planner in Massachusetts, and I've been doing all this reading, and, the more you learn about zoning itself, you're like, oh my goodness, this is a horrible system. Its whole legacy is so wrong. And then I'm like, okay, tamp it down, one thing at a time. You can't just, that's not going to work. I do think we've noticed something where every community in Massachusetts, like if you look at your, a little forensic examination, if you look at what your town's zoning bylaw was in the 1950s, it probably was like 10 pages long. And we've just kind of layered more and more and more stuff on it for good reason and bad,
It's like the tax code.
Yeah. And just, we love to kind of control things and. Yeah. So anyway, I can help you guys. Or I also think we can hook you up with Shelley, who's really pro-y at, working with communities one-on-one to create these trusts.
I think, and I don't know if we should have kind of formulate this into a motion and have a vote, but it seems there's logic in bringing her in to focus on trusts. But
she's really busy.
Can we do it? Do you want to make a motion, or is there consensus? Do we need to be so formal? This is the part of the meetings I'm as chair and just barely familiar with Robert's rules. I wonder how formal we need to be. Yes, Janet.
I guess, I mean, to bring Shelley in isn't, to me, requiring a motion, but to say our first step is to really investigate housing trusts. I think then we need a motion and we need agreement from the authority, not just Shelley's great. She can come in. We don't,
Right.
We can let Dan invite her, for God's sakes. But, I think if we need to make the decision as a group, if that's the direction,
well,
one step. So,
yeah. And just to let you know, sort of at some point, if your group does your research, says this is what we want to do, someone from your Board of Selectmen is going to have to reach out to Mass Housing and say, can you help us with this? Our housing, it sounds to me like you are the designated housing committee in town, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So what I'm hearing is maybe it makes sense to invite Shelley to the next meeting, let her provide us with an education and presentation, and that will inform us further whether it will definitely we need to prioritize on trust, and then we can vote on that. What do people think?
I think also inviting Rini Groden as the chair of the select board into that discussion is probably would save a step, to help. Since she's the one as the chair of the select board is this basically the CEO of the town.
Right.
Then.
Do we want to assume? I mean, that does assume that what we hear from Shelley is yes, and we're going to say yes, and then.
It's a learning process. There's no harm in just listening to her.
Yeah.
And, again, I can't promise her availability. She's super busy. Plus, she just adopted a newborn. She's a single mother with a tiny, tiny baby at home. So she's a little, but she's working, and honestly, the 6:00 start time's great for her.
Okay. So, Chuck, Brian, what do you think of Janet's suggestion that not only do we invite Shelley next time, but Rini Groden to join us for education?
I think that would be a fine idea. It's unlikely that they're intimately familiar with these statutes, so yeah, why not?
And if they're the people that have to really drive it, really not more than we do,
Right.
then they, if she's available, it doesn't seem like it would be a bad idea. So
I still think it's a good idea for y'all to do your own homework.
Oh, yeah.
What kind of support do you have available from Pioneer Valley? Is that a sort of pay-as-you-go type thing?
Yeah, I mean, they'll provide consultation services for us, and the degree that they'll provide is depending on what you pay.
Right.
Yeah.
Is there any other low-hanging fruit, like in your zoning bylaw, a quick change, make make accessory units by right in one district or something like that, just something to get a win going or something. That I'm not, you don't have to decide right now. I'm just saying that could also be, do you have Springtown meeting?
Yes.
Yeah. We have a couple of them a year, so it's not like we only have one. So.
Oh, you have a couple a year. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I do think it's really good for you to start continue the conversation that you had with the planning board. Yeah.
I have another question on the accessory zoning bylaw that I guess in our little 10-year-old plan here, at the time was 600 square feet. I don't know if it's been modified. I don't know if anybody knows. Has it been increased? Because the recommendation is that's kind of small and maybe we don't have a lot of success with accessory because it's 600 square feet. It's just a little tiny. So I don't know if anybody in the authority knows whether or not that's changed over the years or. That's a small step too that we could take to maybe expand it.
Expand the square footage.
They recommended 800 in market study, whether that's correct or not, and maybe in 10 years it's.
I think 600 is a minimum from the Department of Housing and Community Development. I think this is going to be hard to get the planning board to think this way, but one thing I think you need to think about is, why do you care? If it looks the same on the outside, if the building looks the same, what difference does it make how many square feet it is? Unless the concern is like, additional cars. What is the actual thing concerning people about having two families in a house? Is it the aesthetics outside? Is it the parking? Is it tapping into the wastewater?
Right. Were they thinking to make a home a two-family, there was going to be a slight alteration which might expand the footprint? And maybe that's what,
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Can the sewer handle another small living area? So I don't know if that's. I don't think we have an answer.
Yeah, no, it's complicated. I know the community I lived in, there was a lot of opposition because they said, oh, there's going to be, renters, outsiders coming. Really, the stuff people said blew my mind when I got thinking about it. I'm like, isn't that the point? But there's a lot of resistance to this stuff.
Right. Well, change is hard.
Yeah. That was one I just threw out there. A lot of communities have those open space residential development. Actually, a lot of communities have that. Maybe you're familiar with that, where it's, are you even permitting subdivisions in your town these days? What's getting built?
Yeah, there's more subdivisions going in.
Right. So many communities have a sort of, you can do a subdivision, or they can ask you, they can offer as an alternative a conservation subdivision, which clusters the units on a smaller amount of land, but the overall area is the same. That has a number of environmental benefits.
Right.
Can potentially bring the cost down. Those are very popular. That got rolled out in the early 2000s, and many communities around you adopted that.
Right.
There can be a bonus for throwing in one or two affordable units. That it's a good tool in a community of your size.
When you say a bonus, I'm not sure what you mean, because where I've seen it rolled out, like in Northampton, I haven't seen it include an affordable aspect. It was just $500,000 homes built closer together, so that you had intentional space over here that was left as woods that kids could play in. It's open space kind of thing, which is
you
fine.
can do it any number of ways. You can do it where you allow a greater density overall. So let's say you would allow 10 units. You could get an additional 3 units if 1/3 of them was affordable. These are not big numbers, but they're written in all sorts of different ways. So
you incentivize the affordable piece of it.
Yeah, or You know, I read one where they said modestly size, or if you make them modestly sized units, you get a benefit, you know, so there's any number of ways of doing this.
That frankly sounds, admirable, but complex and layered. And it requires people who, I'm not opposed to it. I just don't know. That sounds like a bigger lift than, hey, let's consider expanding the square footage of the accessory apartment.
Yeah. It has not been the magic bullet for affordable housing. I'll tell you that. I do think it's saved quite a bit of open space.
Right.
Which is a big issue here.
It's important.
Right. But I mean, given that we have so much to do and so little time in a volunteer board, just me, I think, that the idea of clustering would be more from Concom rather than the housing authority.
That's a planning board Concom thing. Your focus should be on affordable. I would agree with you 100%.
So that's a good question, because we kind of bat this around too. Are we looking to do affordable housing or housing that's affordable?
That's an excellent question. Like deed restricted.
Right. Versus,
right. My focus on the overlay district is not necessarily to produce affordable housing as defined by HUD, but just make more, expanding the price points on the lower end so that there's more smaller homes that give more economic price points.
Well, let me ask you this. How concerned is the community with Chapter 40B? Because forget about HUD. The reason having units that are big A affordable has assumed this tremendous importance in Massachusetts is there's this 10% affordable units, and then looks like you're all nodding like you get this. It's kind of a block and tackle against 40B more than anything else.
Right. It shields you from a forced development.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
if that's not a big threat in your community, getting it so that it meets the criteria of the subsidized housing inventory may not be as important.
So and again, I keep saying this is just in my opinion, but that's been my sense, that there's not a big concern in town that some developer is going to come in and build this huge, monstrous apartment building, which might not be a bad thing, but the town would probably see it differently, only because we don't have the infrastructure, the sewer and et cetera.
Yeah.
So there's very limited risk of that. We talked about this, I don't know if that part of the planning board meeting where, you have to build their own sewer system essentially. So it doesn't seem to be this overriding concern in town from the citizens and from the people who are in public office who plan these things. It doesn't seem to be, in my sense. And so I have kind of taken the tact, right or wrong, that I definitely want to produce affordable housing. Don't get me wrong. HUD defined affordable housing. I think we need more in this town. But I also think we need more housing on the economic price point where we don't need more $600,000 homes. The market would tell you we do, but I think that's true almost anywhere. But the reality is, as far as who lives in town and what the needs are, we need to expand that price point. I also think, honestly, it's more palatable or sellable to the townspeople if we work that.
Well, I think, people, the line of questioning you entertained with the planning board, with the planning board member that was the builder or the developer, was very, very helpful and interesting, because basically you can roll out every possible tool, but I think it is important at some point to talk to builders and developers and say, if we allowed a smaller lot, if we did reduce the rate, would you build this? Because if the market is dictating 6,000 square foot homes, I personally don't think it is anymore. I think given that everyone in Massachusetts is getting so darn old at this point, that most there's actually a pretty big market for sort of more compact housing. And so how do we get there? But I think it would be important to talk to some local developers about, what would allow them to build something at a lower price point? Is it the lot size that's driving it up? What is it?
Yes.
And Jim, I also want to point out that your thinking about housing that's affordable is on the right track. I'm looking at the 2010 report from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, and the 13th recommendation is to revise the zoning bylaw, and it says that the group responsible is the planning board with the support of the Southampton Housing Authority. And so I think that part of our mandate is to do exactly what you're describing.
Right. I have to admit, I just read that again this week, and like I said, it internalized this time, and it was reassuring to read that. It's like, okay, I'm not off in left field somewhere on this, but I appreciate you bringing that up, Ryan. I think that's
maybe one action item you guys consider is, rather than starting all over again, getting an agreement with the planning board that you're going to do an update of that 2010 plan where you look at those recommendations, measure your progress, and decide which ones you're going to prioritize. Because really, I read it too, not much has changed. Those are all very good recommendations.
right.
But it just would bring it into the public discussion, back into the public discussion.
Right. I read it and I was convinced that we didn't need a new updated plan because it's 10 years old.
Yeah.
Not much has changed. But then I changed my mind when I can't remember the reference, but one of the consultants that we spoke with, I think it was the housing authority person from Acton, Massachusetts, Janet. And one of her strong recommendations was get that updated so you have current data to present to the townsfolk.
It looks to me that a lot of that plan was done before the actual 2010 census data was available.
I that's probably right.
Yeah. So, I mean, even though it's dated 2010, 2012, the data is really not, I mean, and so my thought is that if we do update it, let's get the 2020 census information. So we're not starting with 10-year-old data again. And that can't be too far off.
I was actually reading like a paragraph of it, and it basically was on the census of 2000. So,
Right.
So they didn't do 2020. Right.
That just reinforces Janet's last point, right? You want to do this, but not be in such a hurry to miss the 2020 data.
Right.
And even though not much has changed, to Katie's point, everything that seems logical and easy to this board is going to be a long uphill battle because people resist change naturally anyway. So you want to have the latest data. You want to have it convincing.
Yeah, but, keep in mind that housing, I hope this isn't too much information, the housing production plan in that format, again, is all roped into 40B in that it has to be written in a certain way to get certification from DHCD, and it sets forth sort of short-term goals that give you safe harbor so you can get a 1 year. Anyway, the bottom line is if 40B is not your concern, you can do with your plan what you want. And, I do think even though you do need new data for sure, but my guess, I think it wouldn't be that bad to just look at the recommendations again, revisit them and say, where are we at? Just a checkup, not any official thing. Just bring them as an agenda to the planning board and go, let's talk about these, or to the selectmen, just because it's all, this is what we said then. This is what do you think, guys? What are our priorities now?
So, right. So what I'm hearing you say is we could work on some low-lying fruit items, not 40B, but still want to get good Census 2020 informed update of that plan because we do want to work on 40B.
Eventually, sure, yeah. Anyway, I don't want to overwhelm you all.
Well, it's already overwhelming. So
I know. I'm just so glad that I hope we're going to have a census. I was getting nervous there for a while. So.
Okay. Folks, have any other questions for Katie?
I'm going to circle back with Shelley and just find out what.
Will you please?
Yeah, I'll find out what her deal is right now.
Because we generally meet the first Monday of the month at 6 p.m. so we can telegraph our next meeting, and if she's available. Yeah. I like the idea of inviting Rini. I don't think it's going cart before the horse. We're just all learning if she's available.
Yeah, and we don't have a liaison to the select board like a lot of boards and committees do. So, I mean, not that Rini has any more spare time, but.
Right. I feel for her. The whole select board everybody's overworked in this small town.
It sounds like many of you are on multiple boards.
Yeah, well, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't want to spend too much time, but I think a lot of small, and again, we're not that small, but, there's citizen participation is tough. People are busy. So
for sure.
I'm just thrilled that we have 4 members now. That's like a huge accomplishment. I'm checking that off as an accomplishment. I appreciate Brian coming forward.
And the
Sierra, we haven't scared her yet, so we'll see.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I threw out a lot of stuff. I think we can all kind of digest what we did. I'll talk to Shelley. And then any sort of, continued involvement with the planning board, anything I can do to help with those conversations. What we probably won't do is write your housing production plan for you, or MHP does provide third-party consultants sometimes for a specific project, like, hey, we have this piece of municipal land, we want to develop it. And, someone to sort of walk you through that process. But I don't think you're quite there yet.
No, but it's a place where we want to be. So
yeah,
excuse my ignorance, but MHP, you don't charge anything for this. This is all part of your charter to help towns.
That's right. Because again, I'm not a finance person, but initially the charge was, we're supposed to be doing this. You get what you pay for to a certain extent, because I'm not going to be like writing you a document. Right? I mean, I'll be very honest, but I think we can sort of hook you up with help.
But the data that you provided today is certainly 10 years newer than what we have.
Oh, thanks. Good. Glad to be of help.
Great to see that, visual.
And also just any questions. I mean, you can call.
Katie, I would encourage you, if you go to, I think it's still posted there, townofsouthampton.org website.
Yeah.
You can find the survey that the master plan committee.
I saw that. That
has some really good data in it.
Yeah, it really does. It really does.
And the response rate was tremendous. We had almost
unbelievable.
Over
in the planning
5%.
board. In the link to the planning board meeting, they presented that. And I actually sat through that whole darn meeting and listened to it.
And the gentleman that's the builder is on the zoning board. He's on not the planning board. So
okay, but still a real resource.
Yeah, you have excellent perspective that may be frustrating, but real.
For sure. That's what it's all about. I mean.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just curious before I head out, what else do you guys have on your agenda?
Oh, I didn't include in your invite. I'm sorry. We have.
No, I'm just curious what you're.
We have 6 more items. It looks like 7.
Wow.
So we have review town-owned lots, discussion of the 2010 housing market study. Jan's going to report back on her grant research results. I'm going to report back on getting an MOU template for CARES Act funding. We hope to use CARES Act funding to support rental subsidies in this crisis.
Oh, to do an emergency rental assistance. Okay, so I do have some information about that I'll quick tell you.
Okay.
So that's all being run through what is called regional agencies, and I'll hook you up with the one near you. I could be.
We've been actually already worked on that because we saw newspaper articles. We're working with Community Action.
Oh, great.
Working with Amherst and Hadley, I think.
Yeah.
Already have a point of contact there who's raring to go.
Yeah.
We just need to produce an MOU. We thought we were done because we didn't spend it by December 31st, but it got extended another year.
Well, not just that. Through this latest CARES Act thing, the state is getting up to $425 million in eviction prevention funds. That's going to also, and so the state agencies that have subsidized units are going to just be taking care of theirs, because these poor regional authorities are just getting slammed. I mean, they're not set up to be handling those kind of dollars, but I think there's going to be a lot more. So is that how it works? You enter into an MOU with them?
Right.
Uh-huh.
And Jenna Tetro is the contact at
That's right.
Action. And she's been telling me that so far, because they encourage use of RAFT funds and IRMA funds prior, that the use of the CARES Act funding at this point hasn't been as heavy as they thought in the towns they're currently working with. So the town, I think through the select board, approved a $6,000 budget for us, which I think is going to be more than adequate. But, we don't know where this pandemic is going. Everyone's hopeful with the vaccine and everything, but
yeah,
strains, I don't think we can assume. So I really want to get that going and be ready for hope we don't have to use, but ready for a worst case scenario where people are really going to need that rental assistance.
Yeah. Well, and you don't have a big rental inventory in your town?
Was it 44 units, something like that? Or
that's the HAP housing.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not all. 44 is some group housing as well. But we also have rentals kind of along 10. I'm assuming the rentals.
I think you're right, Jen. Is it like 80 something? It's not a lot. It's not a lot.
And the government supported rentals, they're fine. They're covered. It's the privately owned rental housing where people are getting evicted.
Yeah.
And then the original CARE Act had money for mortgage assistance as well.
Mm-hmm. Right. I'm almost certain that Community Action can assist with that also, but I can confirm that.
Yeah.
And what I love about it is, again, small boards like us that are volunteer, we're not in a position to run that. So you create an MOU and you essentially contract out an agency like Community Action to do it.
That's the way to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I don't want to keep you from your agenda. It's really great meeting you guys, and let's all digest all this information, and just let me know how I can be of use.
Great.
Well, thank you very much, Katie. You're welcome to stay on if you want, but it's already been well over an hour.
You have a good group. I mean, it's like a really good bunch of skill sets.
Yeah. Good dedication here.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Katie. Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Yeah. And I'll get back to you about Shelley.
All right.
Local action units, a whole bunch of different topics.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can you send us the presentation as well?
Yeah, actually.
For today? Sure.
I mean, also it would be good numbers to just add to our pile.
Yep.
Absolutely. Good idea.
Okay, sure. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Sierra, are you going to hang with us? We didn't scare you yet?
Yep, still here.
Awesome. Okay. Well, the next item is a review of town-owned lots not reserved for agriculture or protected for conservation.
So I'm just going to say, I think if we want to put that on hold for the moment and decide what our priorities are, like we were just discussing. I mean, I do have the list. I did kind of pinpoint a property on Middle Road that had some potential, a little more acreage, but I think maybe I don't want to put the cart before the horse. We have the information, and unless we have a housing trust, I don't know what we would do with it. So maybe we need to prioritize instead of, I mean, I'm happy to, I sent to everybody, I think the property and the Sierra didn't get it. I don't think so. My apologies, but the map and
Yeah, I saw that link. So,
yeah, the outlines.
so we can consume it on our own. I want to thank you for doing that work. It's not wasted work because, like you said, we'll need that.
No.
Interesting piece of property.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised to see it out there, and it's you know, it's not like undersized. It's got frontage. It's got property in the back. I'll send you what I did here with the map of the property just to see. I didn't get
Yeah,
it.
sounds good.
I'd love to know the history, how the town ended up owning that, or how that.
Well, I think that was a tax thing as well.
But
But
that's what we need to keep an eye on. It's kind of a gruesome approach to our work, is foreclosure. But
yeah, so the list I sent out, if people got a chance to look at that, you had to go to, I think, sometimes to the right tab. But I mean, there were a few tax-related, situations. Some of them were smaller lots, like the one on Madison, but it still doesn't take it out of the equation if we can get something up there. But I know you talked to Habitat for Humanity, and I mean, I'm just looking for lands that maybe we can work with an organization like that. But it takes a lot of planning, and it's not going to happen tomorrow. But I don't know.
Maybe one of the things we think about too, and I don't want to belabor this because I hear your point, Janet, about moving on. But when you look at, I haven't looked at the Middle Street property, but if you talk about frontage, but if there's water out there and we think about maybe doing an overlay district, maybe we get more than one unit out of that property if there's space. You know what I'm saying?
I
approach
think
it strategically.
Yeah, I think that if you want to do something that's kind of conservation and smaller lots and just have, I think it's got some potential. It's not one lot where we can stick a house and, it looked like there might be, I forget offhand how much property was there. But
It looked bigger than the other.
Yeah.
The other parcels. Looked pretty wooded. It looked a lot of wood.
Yeah.
I was looking at the Google map of it actually when I didn't go by it, but I was fascinated with it.
Yeah, I sent out the Google map, I think, right? So
Yeah.
But
Okay. Well, it's been, over an hour, so I'm going to move along to discussion on 2010 Southampton housing market study. Well, fortunately, we just discussed this a little bit with Katie. And it sounds like folks read it, and in the case of me, reread it.
and I'll send a copy to Sierra too. If it's on the website, Sierra, but I'm happy to move it along to you.
Awesome, thanks.
I guess, is there a discussion, or is the discussion around what we were talking about with Katie, that we need to get an update, but the timing of that update really should be based on the 2020 census data included? Is that where we are, or am I jumping too far ahead of the other things to discuss on this?
That's what I think. I think it should be based on the 2020 census, not the 2010, because it's like I'd rather have the most updated information.
Does anyone feel we should not be updating this?
I mean, I think it needs to be updated, but I also think that there's some, identified actions that we don't know if they've even taken place, I guess, is part of my question. And then, based on what some of the recommendations are for, whether it's outreach and partnership or the creation of local land trusts. I mean, what are our priorities? I mean, we certainly can use this type of documentation to try to establish some of that before work, while we wait for another updated.
Agreed. I feel, reading that again and like I said, internalizing it more made me feel like it was more reinforcing what we're already doing. So I do think we don't need to wait for an updated document to do some of the things we need to do. And what they recommended was in line with what some of the things we were already pursuing. So it was very reinforcing for me. which is why initially I thought, why do we need a new document? But I think we do. You just need to have better data if you start getting in the weeds and you're starting to try to convince people. And if you have folks who are concerned and they're hesitant to support it, they might point to old data as a reason not to support it, which is another reason to get updated data. But we shouldn't be sitting around waiting inactive for that updated data. I think that's what you're saying, Janet.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I would agree, because the earliest that we'd be able to even commission a study like that would be probably next fiscal year, at least, maybe even next calendar year.
Right, because the fiscal year starts June 1st, right?
Right, and I can't imagine we'd get good data by then.
Agreed.
So yeah, I would say that it's for education. I'm glad that we all read it, and it can help guide some of our thinking, but it's not the document that we'll use ultimately.
Or singularly. Even.
Singularly, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so try to facilitate that. If it feels good to move on from that, we can move on to Janet, report back on grant research updates or your results.
I did send a list of some different sites, I
saw that.
And so that's the data I've collected so far. I mean, I think we need to divide and conquer a little bit on that if some other people would be interested in doing some research on the different sites. I don't know how legitimate they are, but those are kind of a list of what was uncovered with some help from our grant committee. So,
well, I have a suggestion that something that's not on the agenda, but because it's a presumption, but should Sierra say, I'm interested in being on this board, and we can figure out the mechanization to make it happen through the state appointment. You did mention you have some familiarity with grants, and it might be.
I was just going to say.
You need to be identifying subject matter experts in this team on this housing authority, and not that we can't divide and conquer and look at them, but it might be efficient to have you be that person.
I would love to be that person. Grant research is right up my alley. I also have membership to a grant website. I actually borrow it from a friend in a different organization, but from my nonprofit, via her nonprofit, I have access to Grant Station, which is like something you have to pay for to look at grants. So I can look at those. And I can also definitely dig deeper into the ones that Janet sent. My only concern is that because I don't know everything about your plans yet, in terms of eligibility, sometimes I won't know what we're eligible for because I don't know that much about housing yet, but I can definitely get started and see where it goes and come back with questions if I have any.
Would you be willing to, now I'm really pushing it, would you be willing as merely an interested citizen, which is what you are at this point and not yet on the housing authority, to pursue this and report back to us as an interested citizen?
Yeah.
Can I ask like a sub question? I want to revisit the question I asked earlier when Katie was still with us, because I'm not familiar with grants, but it would surprise me to hear that there are not grants available that could be used to fund a position. So is that something that is conceivable, that there's money out there to give us the town to hire a community housing organizer or some such position?
Yes, that's definitely pretty standard, especially if it's, not necessarily a position that's always been happening that you're looking for funding for, but grantors love pilots, new programs. And so if you're hiring someone to develop a new program, I think that's even more likely. One thing that doesn't always work is, hiring the person and then hoping that they grant write to make enough money to pay themselves, because you got to pay that person to write those grants, unless it's one of us, in which case, or the grant committee of Southampton. So, oftentimes there's sort of this delay where you have to apply for the funding and wait to get the answer before you can actually start doing the work. But we can see sometimes there's, in these trying times, a lot of grants have faster turnaround time because they know people really need the money. So we can see what's out there.
Wonderful, thank you.
So you're saying fund the person and give them a percentage of the grant that's awarded?
I'm saying you shouldn't pay them based on the grant that's awarded, but what you could do is you could write a grant saying, we want to establish a housing trust. We're working towards improving the affordability of housing in our town. Here's our step to get there. Here's our budget, $15,000, part-time housing trust administrator. And so it just becomes part of the budget for a larger project, I guess.
Right, that is what I'm thinking, and that's good to hear that it's not unheard of. So
yeah, definitely heard of.
That's interesting.
Can I also make a recommendation that I know on the Council on Aging Board, we actually have alternate board members that basically aren't able to vote for, but participate as active members. And then if we don't have a full quorum, they actually fill the quorum and then they have voting power.
That's interesting.
Well. And, if we're, I don't know if we want to start with something like that. I mean, we have bylaws on the COA, but I don't think we have bylaws on the Housing Authority. That we probably have something, but I don't know that we define that. But just a thought, to get Sarah on board faster.
Yeah,
Well,
and I'll send in my volunteer form tomorrow. So, and I'm totally happy to just volunteer. It's not like, I would be elected anytime soon anyway. So for me, it's all just sort of paperwork.
Okay.
Right. And I think if I'm understanding the state part of this board, it would be appointed, not elected. And so to Janet's point, I think, I don't know if we can work that also. I love the idea. I never even considered it. But even if we can't, the only thing we'd be missing, because Sierra, what I'm hearing you say is, hey, I'm ready to go to work, even as a citizen
Yes.
who calls in, which anybody can do. And hearing that, first of all, thank you, because that's really what we need. We haven't had a single vote yet tonight, other than to approve the minutes. So it's not about voting. It's the work and the expertise, and you bring something, and your willingness to do it. Yay! Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Not to say we're going to not pursue the whole thing with the state. I have to, I'll own figuring out how that works, and okay. I'll start probably. I'll email Rini as the chair of the select board and say, how does that work and what do we need to do? Because we have someone, and get that going. So you can be a full-fledged member, and then you can cast a vote when we vote.
Yeah, and Ed may have an idea as well from Ed Gibson.
Ed Gibson.
Yeah.
That's actually probably a better suggestion. I could email them both, and we'll cover the base. Good idea.
It's my understanding that it involves mailing a letter of interest out to a law firm in Boston that's sort of assigned the task of appointing this person.
I think
that's step one, is to write a letter of interest.
On the town website, they actually, under the volunteer section, it actually has the state appointed information, the application. Just send it. It's actually written out to the person you send a letter to.
Oh, perfect.
I believe it's on there.
Cool. So I'll do this. I'll email Ed and Rini and say, just want to confirm that this letter that's on the town website is how we proceed to get someone appointed by the state to our board. Do you have any objections or suggestions? So we can speed this up. Rather than waiting for them to tell me that, I'll say, this is what we know. Thanks, Chuck. And stop me if it's a problem. Okay. Good. All right. So see, no good deed goes unpunished, Sierra. You show up and you immediately have work.
That's what I'm here for.
Awesome.
I'd feel useless if I wasn't contributing something. So.
Awesome. Thank you.
And I even remember to send you the link this time,
Yeah, you sent me the link, and you sent me your preliminary grant research, so you've already got me started.
I'm sending you the housing plan.
Awesome.
Nice.
So.
Nice. Okay, Now we're ripping through our agenda. So I'm going to report back on the MOU for use of CARES Act funding. So I haven't heard back from Ed yet. I was hoping to get a template of an MOU. I've had MOUs that I've used at work, but they're very generic and not appropriate for this. I haven't heard back. So I think the next tact I'm going to take is I'm going to go to Community Action, who already has relationships with other towns, and ask them for an MOU template that we can use. They'll be motivated to get me one right away, and then we can draw it up and get it to Ed and get it signed by the necessary authorities. What do folks think of that approach?
Yeah, I mean, the Board of Health MOU for the contact tracing was done by the Board of Health. So, I mean, that sounds like
Right.
we can give it to them, might be faster than us asking Ed what it looks like.
Right. I think, and again, I don't feel competent to come up with an MOU. I have no idea what I'm doing. So let's just let those who are motivated by the need for the contract, Community Action, they do it all the time. Send me an MOU template. Okay. Good. All right. And again, just if you didn't hear me earlier, it's on the agenda, but the CARES Act funding was extended for another year, calendar year. So we have through December 31st, 2021 to spend the money, and that is really going to be helpful.
Yes.
Brian, I put this on the agenda. Maybe I missed it, but did you talk about the Municipal Trust Guidebook? Do you have?
Well, to put it on the agenda that way, I wasn't necessarily going to speak about the guidebook, but to speak about some of the regulations that I was reading about and some of the responsibilities for the trust. So that was sort of the focus of what I was planning.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. So basically what I would tell folks who are watching this meeting in the future is the best information came from the Katie Lacey discussion. So anybody who is watching this might want to just go back and look at that prior. I'll skip a lot of the stuff that we already talked about, but essentially at least one person from the Board of Selectmen has to be on the trust board, and then the others are appointed another way. It basically says the town manager and the town administrator can serve as members of the board as well, but they don't have to. Essentially, the goal is to create new affordable housing opportunities rather than to let the money sit there and accumulate through time, or let the money sit there while we wait for the dream project. The goal of creating the trust is to get moving and to make projects happen. So it's about momentum more than anything else. And without town meeting approval, the trust would be able to make transactions and execute deeds. It would also be able to employ advisors like accountants and appraisers, and it would be able to pay them and not necessarily seek anybody else's permission before executing those transactions. So a couple of things that I just wanted to read real quick. The town of Medway recently hired a community housing coordinator, and the housing trust is actually responsible for that person. They work under the supervision of the town administrator and the general policy direction of the Affordable Housing Trust Board of Trustees. And so that's sort of why I'm interested in this idea of hiring someone from the outside to do the actual work, to do the paperwork and the sitting in the office and the phone calls. And I think it would be ideal to hire someone, maybe even out of the money that's available in the trust already. I don't know if that's legal or, advisable, but if we have $400,000, maybe we can pay somebody 15 of it for a part-time position. The sources of funding for the trust, I'll just give you the list. The CPA fund, inclusionary zoning payments, negotiated developer fees. The general fund is a potential source of contributions to the trust, but it's not a popular one. A lot of towns don't do it at all, apparently, and I'd say it's politically trickier than some of these others, like a tax title sale, payment from special bylaws and ordinances, which I am assuming means like pilot money. You know, if there's a nonprofit organization in town that doesn't pay property taxes, they might instead pay, you know, an annual check, payment in lieu of taxes, and it could go into this trust fund as well. Cell tower lease payments, and I thought was very interesting the idea of getting private donations. And so I know that there are some giant organizations out there giving out very large amounts of money, and why not give us a chunk of it? So yeah, those are the most interesting things that I was able to find out that we haven't discussed already. It seems like everybody's on the same page about what the purpose is. Does anybody have any questions about how it works, or who's in charge, or what can and can't be done, anything like that?
Yeah, before we can hire somebody.
Jim, you're
Go ahead, Janet.
Sorry, before we hire somebody like that, we have to have the trust group established first, right? So we don't do that. That would go to the trust, okay, from the trustees.
right, and the town meeting is the one that would be asked to create the trust. So the Board of Selectmen, it would be done in consultation with them because one of their members would have to serve. But the town meeting would be deciding on whether or not to do it.
Okay, so it does have to go to vote for a trust, okay.
Yes.
Thanks. So I was going to say an observation and a question. My observation is, you know, obviously the biggest thing that comes with a trust is the ability to perform financial transactions in a timely manner. You know, to have to go to a town meeting to purchase a piece of property it's never going to work. So there's a lot of advantages to a trust, but to me that's a singular largest advantage. And so my question, Brian, is it appropriate, is it allowed, is it recommended that a member of the housing authority is also on this board that oversees the trust? Or is it simply the town CEO, the select board chair, maybe the town administrator, and other citizens outside of the housing authority? You know, is it a conflict of interest, or is it appropriate for the housing authority to be represented on that board for the trust?
Well, I'm reading section 55C right now, and it is the statute that allows us to establish the fund. And in that 2-page document, I don't see reference to conflict of interest, for example. It says the trust is a public employer and the members of the board are public employees for purposes of Chapter 258. I don't happen to know what that says, but I assume it's the statute that makes us government employees as well, because although we're not paid, we're required to, you know, submit certain types of documentation to the town as though we were employees. You know, and so I believe that that's the same thing that's happening here. The trust shall be deemed a municipal agency, and the trustees are special municipal employees. And that's basically all it says. It doesn't say who can't serve.
Okay. All right,
Can I ask a
thanks.
question? So when you establish the trust, is there going to immediately be money in it, or are we going to have to wait till it accrues from all these transactions and things that it comes in from?
Well, let me figure out if I can determine the exact mechanism. But what it says is the town gives the trust the right to accept and receive real property, personal property, or money by gift, grant, contribution, devise, or transfer. And so it's my understanding that we would just take the CPA portion that's designated for affordable housing and transfer it into a separate designated account.
That would have to,
I think
that would have to be approved by the town.
right. I assume that the Board of Selectmen is the one in charge of like in between account transfers. Right, they're the ones who approve whether or not to switch money from one place to another?
I think the citizens have to vote to transfer money out of the CPA fund. That would have to go to town meeting to.
It might be a town meeting thing, exactly.
Yeah, I think I talked to Virginia for community preservation about something similar. Is like if you want to take money from CPA, you have to bring it to town meeting and then use it for housing. It's no different than when we do for projects. Yes, pickleball court, pickleball courts.
Yes.
Same thing.
Now, could you conceivably, could you write a warrant article that says, approval of this would establish the trust and fund it? Or do you know if that has to be two separate articles?
It could be the same. I would think a trust would have to be approved and then the transfer of funds would have to follow, but you could I don't know if you could make a one lump transaction.
Might be one of those legal questions that you probably have to ask legal if you can combine it.
Right.
Yeah, or Ed.
Yeah, or Ed.
Another Ed. Yeah, I mean, the good thing about the trust is that it's not CPA funds. It's, people can make donations. I mean, it's not going to grow it a little bit every year. It can possibly grow, once Jim makes his donation. So that's good stuff.
I was purposely on mute there.
Oh.
Okay, other questions for Brian? Appreciate you doing that research.
Sure.
So in our inclusionary zoning bylaw, do we offer them an alternative to pay money into a trust in lieu of building an affordable house?
What was that question again? I'm sorry.
Well, Brian mentioned inclusionary zoning payments. So do we have a program when they're building 10 houses, if they don't want to build, they want to build 10, and if they give us a donation to the trust of a set dollar amount, instead of building an affordable house, they make a donation to the trust?
I think that's written into the zoning law, if I'm not mistaken. Do we have an inclusionary zoning bylaw? I don't know it at the back of my hand, but I think that's part of it. That essentially the developer can opt out of that by making a certain percentage payment. And I'm not sure how it's written and what the formula is, but I'm nearly certain that's written in there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we'll move on to agenda item 9 of 11, and our last one has anything. So we're getting there, folks. Appreciate your patience. Jim and Janet reporting back on Mass Housing Partnership conferences. I went to one, Janet went to a couple, I think.
I've done the 2.
Mm-hmm.
That's, I don't know if you want to, do you have something? Why don't you start, Jim? Because
well,
a lot of information. It's hard to just blurt it out, I think, at a meeting. So
it is a lot of information. I can say I'm just going to step back again, take the 30,000-foot view, and say I found it very helpful. I took notes, but honestly, I think the easy tap out shortcut. It was informational, but having someone like Katie readily available from a MHP is probably frankly the easier route to go. It was a good conference, and I learned things which I have, frankly, much of it has since forgotten, but I'd have to grab up my notes and look at it. But I would encourage anyone to attend these conferences, but I think, again, having availability for MHP, because sometimes our questions are in the moment or shift. Not much of an explanation, but that was my take on it, that it was helpful. I don't know, Janet, you.
Yeah, no, there was a lot of information and
sometimes a little overwhelming.
Yeah, the first one was a really good presenter, and I think went at a pace I could understand. The second one was a little bit faster and a little more complicated, but because it's all about how do we use CPC funds or CPA funds for, for housing, for affordable housing. So
Mhm.
I'm just looking to see if there's anything under the CPA funds. Communities assign CPA funds directly to housing trust was one comment that was made, but it was, Shelley was one of the presenters on here. And did you get Shelley's email and stuff from that? Because I did write that down. I can send it off to you.
I don't recollect receiving an email from Shelley.
No,
I'm over my notes now.
she gave us her email address at the presentation.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they talked about housing trust a lot, trustee members. That's why it all sounds so familiar, Brian. I guess because I do this. Because they say it's select one select board member, the select board appoints the others. They're 2-year terms, and they're considered public agents.
Janet, you're right. I mean, maybe that's why one of the things that I got was how much the information I got. But now that I'm hearing it over and over from different, Brian just reported on it, Katie reiterated again. Now it's becoming like second nature, and I'm forgetting where did I get this from. But I did remember the conference getting a lot about housing trusts and finding it valuable. So it's starting to sink in for me. Sometimes I'm a little thick, but that was one of the places that helped, help it, sink in.
And one of the things they did share, Brian, too, for the trust was keys to success for raising funds, the inclusionary zoning. So that's why that sounded so familiar to me. Payment in lieu of building, free cash designation. So I guess some communities, when they, our community does capital and 3 different buckets, I think, for free cash. You could actually vote to take a percentage every year of free cash to put into a housing trust to help build that up. Marijuana tax, so maybe that's something we can think about coming in the near future.
Mm-hmm.
Tax override, which is more like the CPA funds anyway. But those were some of the things that they talked about under housing trusts. I'm just looking up other things. Yeah, they talked a lot. The first one was heavily on housing trusts. So that's interesting. But yeah, successful trusts have paid technical and administrative support. That was one of their key things. So I'm just looking to
I
see.
thought they were valuable, but my error is it doesn't do much help if you can't find your notes.
But I found the first session to be very interesting, and then it was kind of above my head.
What was the second session about, Janet?
Well, it was more about the finance part of affordable housing and AMI, and they went through examples of that and federal subsidy sources, so low-income housing tax credits, LIHTCs, block grants, which I know in the report, it said, we're too wealthy to really qualify for block grants sometimes as a community. Looking through net operating incomes, again, and then they talked about how developers can apply for mass housing partners for financing. So if they're somebody that wants to work in building affordable housing, that they could get rates from Mass MHP for that. So that's kind of what the second was, more on the financial side. So the second session, and the third one's coming up this month, I think later this month, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that helps at all.
Well, I think, you don't realize that you're getting this information from multiple sources. All of us are. So the more we hear it, the more it's reinforced. That's a good thing. Feel more competent. But it actually, your presentation there, Janet, just reminded me of a question for Brian, or clarification that I think we all need to think about is when we create a housing trust, it really has to be focused on affordable housing as defined by HUD, not these other areas we're talking about. Is that correct? We don't want to conflate the two.
Well, let me clarify and say that the sources of funding can include CPA funds. So when you create the trust fund, you could put all of your designated CPA funds into it. But that's not the only way that you can get money into it. And you also don't have to put 100% of it, it seems.
Mm-hmm. But it's also true that the purpose of that trust and where you spend that money on is to increase the housing stock, affordable housing stock, affordable as defined by HUD.
I see what you're saying. Yes, it says the purpose of the trust, and this is directly from Section 55C. The purpose of the trust is to provide for the creation and preservation of affordable housing in municipalities for the benefit of low and moderate income households and for the funding of community housing as defined in Chapter 44B. So it does sound to me like they're talking about the HUD definition of affordability.
And not only that, but it feels to me, one of my goals is to, expand the economic price points in town. But I don't feel we should be using, even if we could, public money for that purpose. It should be used to help with affordable housing in town, because that's where the money's really needed. In theory, there's hopefully a market for these other price points that expand our price points in town on the more economical end, but don't meet the definition of affordable as AMI and all that. And I don't think we should. It doesn't feel right even if we could, to use that money for that kind of thing.
Well, how about something like a small tiny home community for the elderly that isn't necessarily the HUD definition of affordable? Would that be a little more in line with what you're thinking?
It is, but is it legitimate to use the trust for that purpose if it doesn't fit the affordable? That's the question. You're right. It's a bit of a gray area what I'm thinking. You're right. That's a really good example where it's gray. But is it legal and legitimate to use a trust or something like that?
I mean, one of the titles was, affordable housing trust. So that would kind of define that it's.
When they say affordable, do they mean, the HUD definition? Because I could walk down the street and say, oh, look at that house. That's affordable. But, the everyday citizen doesn't think, that's not the HUD definition of affordable.
I would guess that CPC funds can kind of are restricted for affordable versus.
I would guess that too, but Brian, I love that example of trying to create if you create a little community of tiny homes for the senior citizens, can we facilitate that financially by using the trust? Maybe not if it doesn't meet the HUD criteria. But then again, with a tiny home, it probably does, and that's where hopefully those two circles intersect.
So Shelley would be a good person to help us answer these questions, I think, right? So.
Indeed.
Right.
Indeed. Okay. All right, folks, a lot of hard work done tonight. I realize it's getting late. I thank you all for your patience. We've hit all the agenda items. Is there anything further to discuss, or should we schedule the next meeting?
So my only other thing and can be at the next meeting, is to really prioritize some of our activities. Is trust as a board or as an authority where we want to put our number one energies. It sounds like it from all these discussions. Mm-hmm. But I think, as we talked earlier, those are the kind of things we have to decide, I think, as a authority, as to what are our top, what do we want to do 1, 2, 3. Just to start, like you said, to get overwhelmed with 11 or 13 or however many
right
we have in the plan.
Should we also?
I'd say that there's.
Go ahead.
Sorry, it seems from the advisors that we're listening to that there's a general consensus that a trust would help. So I think that whatever action item comes out of this should bring us closer to that reality.
Right. I mean, if we want to spend some time now doing a priority, we can, but I feel we have consensus that we are establishing a trust is the number one priority.
I'd like to make a motion like that myself, that we would focus on a housing trust as our number one priority starting 2 years ago. No, effectively moving forward.
Would someone like to second that motion?
I forget that I have to take notes.
Second that, sure.
Are there any items to discuss, or we can take a vote? All in favor by name and vote, please.
Kane, aye.
Kennedy, aye.
DLI.
Sini, aye. All right, it's unanimous. Good. Speaking of prioritizing, should we work to see if we can't get Shelley to join us for the next meeting? I'm going to get that information from Katie, but assuming that she can join us for the next meeting, you guys good with her being on the agenda?
Yes.
Yeah, especially if she has the knowledge of the trusts, and that's our number one priority. It's perfect to me, in my opinion. Do you want me to give you her email address? I'll email you her email address, and I think she also gave us a phone number at that first training,
Perfect.
Jim. So,
Yes, if you could send that to me, please.
who seconded the motion? I'm sorry,
It's Brian,
Brian. Okay, thank you.
and it was unanimous. Good. Getting a lot done tonight.
Action items.
The action items, I like it. So the first Monday in February is the 1st. How's that work for folks? 6 o'clock? Excellent.
Sounds good.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn, or are we missing something yet?
I'll make a
So
motion.
moved.
Brian, adjourn. I'll second.
All right. All in favor of adjourning?
Kane, aye.
I was waiting for everyone, but Kennedy, aye.
DLI.
Sini, aye. I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all. Sierra, thank you for attending. Thank you for, I will pursue your appointment from the state. But in the meantime, I very much appreciate your willingness to start researching things as an interested and invested citizen.
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
same.
Can't
That's
wait.
wonderful.
And I'm happy to help, Sarah. So if there's something you say, you want to take a look at this, I'm happy to do that. So
Awesome. Thank you, guys. It's been a pleasure.
All right. If we get lucky, maybe you'll be on this board on February 1st. I
Yeah.
know that's pretty
We'll
aggressive, but if not, I really, really want to, welcome you and to return on February 1st at 6 p.m. as a citizen, if you're not yet on.
Yes, I will be there. I will report out on my research as a guest.
Awesome. All right, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Be
Great
well.
meeting, folks. Heavy agenda, but good stuff. Thank you.
bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye.